Mandukya Upanishad by Dr. Jahira Khatun, who is a fellow at Nehru Memorial Museum and Library. Um, Mandukya Upanishad, as we know, is regarded as one of the later Upanishads. Uh, the earliest age of or the earliest Upanishads are usually regarded either as coterminous with the lifetime of Buddha or slightly earlier. There is, I think, some dispute among historians whether Brihadaranyaka and Chandogya Upanishad, whether they precede Buddha or they were written after the Buddha. But so far as I'm aware, among the historians, there isn't such a big dispute about the chronology of the Mandukya Upanishad. It is regarded as later, probably 400 or 500 years after these earliest Upanishads were written. So maybe the first century AD or the first century BC, something like that. And of course, it's written in prose. It's very, very short. Um, I think it has just 12, just 12 verses. And the focus of the Mandukya Upanishad is on describing Om. What is the meaning and significance of Om, and how Om, in a way, constitutes the reflection of the cosmos and the universe. And now the 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 larger point where we need to situate uh, the Mandukya Upanishad, and of course the discussion on Advaitism as such, is slightly different. Now we know that there has been a fascination since the 19th century in India about Advait. Uh, I will come to this thing later, but briefly I can say this here, that partly this fascination with Advait started as a result of uh, a reaction as a defense mechanism to an ascendant Christianity, which claimed that the Hindu religion is somehow backward, regressive, and it has all kinds of unnecessary rituals and polytheism, etc. So, our leaders, philosophers, thinkers, they developed too much of fascination for Advait. And why? Because it seemed like it was, of course, it had always been a very important school of darshan in India, and many great philosophers, writers over thousands of years had written on it. But I'm just trying to situate how, from the 19th century onward, it gained special importance, especially in the eyes of our intelligentsia, because they wanted to prove that Hinduism was no less, sanitized than Christianity. Anyway, we'll come to this later. But the point is that if we do discuss Advait, then certainly Mandukya Upanishad is one of the foundational texts, and therefore we have to come to Mandukya Upanishad. And I think Jahira's work, larger work, is on Manisha Panchakam, but I think she will talk about that only in her next lecture. But today we are going to hear her views on critical analysis of what Mandukya Upanishad says about Brahma, the relationship between the gross self as it appears and the ultimate self. So, without any further delay, now I would like to invite Dr. Jahira to continue to start with her lecture, speak for about 35 minutes, and then we will have a discussion.
Thank you, sir. I extend my greetings to Honorable Chair and distinguished scholars. It is a great experience for me to be here in Nehru Memorial Museum and Library. I had a chance to listen very learned scholars on different subjects here. Today I'm going to discuss a slightly different topic because it has philosophical and metaphysical moorings. The topic of my presentation is the notion of Advaitism in Mandukya Upanishad. Advait denotes one, not two. The basis of Advait philosophy is metaphysical. Metaphysics try to understand the nature of being, the relation between absolute, individual, and the phenomenal world. Advait gives emphasis on metaphysical aspect of ultimate reality. So God are not two, but two aspects of the only reality. Same as an individual self is not different from Brahman. Due to his illusion, individual self imagines the manifold external objects. Advait Darshan contends that truth can be realized through aparokshanubhuti or intuitive experience. Since experience and reason are sources of knowledge, they suffer from limitations. Sense experience cannot go beyond certain limits of time and space. Reason is a discursive method of knowledge. Reason and mind function in fraction. It cannot apprehend the ultimate reality, which is nirgun or beyond the limits of qualities, names, and forms. Aparokshanubhuti observes the essence of sense experience. It gives us knowledge as a whole. The empirical level of existence is fraught with ignorance. Ignorance breeds contradictions, and non dualism transcends all sorts of contradictions and opposition. Spiritual aspect of individual being determines the eradication of ignorance. It transforms human beings. The tone of spirituality is ethical because seeker transform his or her existence during spiritual enlightenment, and spiritual enlightenment transform the seeker. When individual self is spiritually awakened, his behavior changes and he follows ethical values. As a matter of fact, ethics and spirituality prepare the ground for understanding metaphysical status of man and the world. Philosophy of Advaitism expounds the way to enjoy the world after realizing their own nature, which is identical with Brahman or absolute and even the nature of fellow beings. The Advait philosophy is predominantly associated with the system of Adi Shankaracharya, but its root is in the Vedas and the Upanishad. Yagyavalla is known as the great exponent of Advaitism. During the discourse with Uddalak Rishi at the court of King Janak, he had explained the non-dual nature of Brahman. There are so many other sages delineated the concept of non-dualism, but their narratives are not available to us. The first systematic and available exposition on Advait Vedant is Mandukya Karika, which was compiled by Acharya Gaudpad. Mandukya Karika is a commentary on the Mandukya Upanishad. The cardinal position of Mandukya Upanishad is the concept of non-dualism. It is a treatise on Indian philosophical thought which propounds the emergence of the philosophy of Advaita. The theme of Mandukya Upanishad is an intuitive perspective of human consciousness. It asserts the Advaitic nature of Supreme Self. It contains only 12 verses but covers the essence of entire Vedic thought. The objective of Upanishad is to lead mankind towards the ultimate truth, to get rid from ignorance and realizing the Jeev of his true nature and the nature of reality. Ordinarily, empirical self remains in bondage. By bondage, I mean the cycle of birth and death. The goal of man is to get rid from this cycle. Naturally, man longs for self-transcendence, and the objective of Mandukya Upanishad is to pave the way of self-transcendence. First mantra of Mandukya Upanishad. Sarvam Omkara Ev. Everything is Om. Indeed, this is how the Upanishad begins. This mantra proclaims that Omite Tadaksharam. Om is Akshar and Akshar is imperishable. Om is imperishable. All name in this world is destructible, for it goes with the corresponding form. But this universal form is eternal. This universal name or Om is also eternal, which corresponds each and every entity of this phenomenal world. We perceive and recognize any object by the name. We know about something by the name of that particular thing. We differentiate the things or objects on the basis of their nature or the qualities. This mantra states that idam sarvam, all this, whatever is visible, whatever is cognizable, whatever can come within the purview of perception, inference, or verbal testimony, whatever can be comprehended under the single term creation, all this is Om. In its very opening verse, the Mandukya Upanishad describes the significance of Om. It also explains the relation of Om with the Supreme Self and the creation. The imperishable absolute is Om, and it is all this. Everything else, whatever be of the past, present, or future, is an exposition, the imperishable Om. This verse declares Om as everything that exists from the beginning to end. The past, the present, and the future, and also whatever there is beyond the threefold time is Omkar. Everything of the mundane world is conditioned by triple condition of time. What is becoming, what has become, and what will become is verily Om. And what is beyond this triple condition of time, that is past, present, and future, is Om only. Sarvam Hetad Brahma. Ayam Atma Brahm. All this indeed is Brahman. Second verse of Māndūkya Upanishad is the cardinal doctrine of Advaitism. All this is indeed Brahman. The whole creation is just the Supreme Self alone, is the message of this statement. In this month, this referred to the whole creation, and being a part of this creation, individual self is also denoted by this. This individuality is ultimately unifiable with that supreme self, which is absolute but appears to be distant. The world has been created with the support of Maya. The Maya is illusory power of creator. It is composition of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Brahman endowed with Maya is Ishwar. Brahman is unqualified and indescribable, but Ishwar has enormous attributes. They are not two realities. It is one and only one. Brahman associated with cosmos or the world is Ishwar, and when Ishwar dissociated with the world is Brahman. In due course, Ishwar creates Hiranyagarbha. Hiranyagarbha is the first creation of the Ishwar. Out of the Hiranyagarbha, subtle entities or Panch Tanmatras have been created. The subtle entities become Panch Mahabhut when they manifested in the world. Subtle things cannot be perceived. Jeev perceive only gross objects. The world, which is created by Panch Mahabhutas or gross entities, is known as Virat. Ishwar is the cause of creation, and Virat is the cosmic level of creation. Hiranyagarbha and Virat are associated with the creation. Hiranyagarbha identifies by the subtle things, and Virat is the manifestation of the entire gross world. So cosmic Brahman has three states. First is Ishwar, which is the causal form of creation, Hiranyagarbha in the subtle form, and Virat in gross form. Mandukya Upanishad describes the non-dual nature of Brahman. It states that whole manifestation is none other than Brahman. Individual self or Atman is also the cosmic aspect of Brahman. Brahman is the essence of all individual beings. This verse of Mandukya Upanishad describes that Atman is four-footed, or the self has four aspects. The first foot is Vaishvanar, who possesses gross things in the state of wakefulness. The second foot is the Tejas, who possesses executive things in the state of dream. The third state is Pragya, who possesses bliss in the state of deep sleep. The fourth state of Atman, which is pure consciousness and alone without a second. This mantra is the description of universal being or Vaishvanar. This verse of Mandukya Upanishad is a
It's
description.
better if you read it out, no? Let people hear.
Mantra.
Mm-hmm. All right. All right.
So this mantra of Mandukya Upanishad is the description of first quarter of the Atman. This is first phase of the inquiry of consciousness in its relation to gross existence, both cosmically and individually. It is called Vaishvanar or Virat. Vaishvanar has Bahi Pragya or the consciousness towards external world. Cosmically, it has Saptang or seven limbs, and individually, it has 19 mouths. It is Sthulabhuk or enjoyer of the gross world in both ways, individually and cosmically. Virat is an awareness of the gross entities. In the case of Jeev, it is a desire for the phenomena. It is known as the waking state because of being the seat of gross enjoyment of the outer world. It represents all embodied beings as part of a universal embodied being. It stands for the recognition that this universal being manifests in diverse gross forms. In this stage, consciousness turns towards phenomenal world and enjoys gross objects through seven limbs and 19 mouths. The seven limbs are macrocosmic, while 19 mouths are microcosmic. In the waking stage, gross body as well as the senses and the mind experience and function external objects. All of these seven instruments and 19 channels are the means by which the self or Atman operates in the external world. Individual self operates gross objects through the inner instrument or antahkaran, which are manas, buddhi, chit, and ahankar. Those four operate through the five vayu, pran, apan, saman, udan, and vyan. The five active senses or karmendriya are eliminating, procreating, moving, grasping, and speaking. And the five cognitive senses or jnanendriya are of smelling, tasting, seeing, touching, and hearing. These are the 19 means through which manifestation seems to exist and through which consciousness seems to experience the empirical world.
Okay. Yeah.
This mantra of Mandukya Upanishad is the explanation of dream state of consciousness. Mandukya Upanishad explains the second state of consciousness, stages, whose arena of activity is dream state. It is antaha pragya or internally conscious because the mind can project a world in dream independent of the activities of the waking senses. The mind projects itself as the senses of dream and becomes capable of contacting dream objects, which also are a partial manifestation of the same mind. The mind divides itself into the subject and the object, the seer as well as the seen. The subtle desires repressed within manifest themselves in dream. The desires cannot all operate in the waking world because the reality is there, opposing them from outside. In this state, consciousness turns towards the inner world and enjoys subtle objects of the mental world through the 7 limbs and 19 mouths. This verse delineates the essence of self in deep sleep. Third state of Atman is the state of deep sleep. In this stage, individual self or Jeev does not desire any gross object nor desire any subtle things. This is called Shushupti or deep sleep, where na kanchan kamam kamyate. One desires nothing because the mind has withdrawn itself from both the gross and subtle objects. It does not dream also because even psychic activities have ceased. This is complete absorption of the mind into self, but this absorption is of an unconscious nature. The state of consciousness is pragya, in which all experiences merged or unified with supreme consciousness, which is eternal and blissful, but ignorance or avidya is still persist in Shushupti avastha. This mantra is the exposition of the creator of the cosmos. This is the higher consciousness of this phenomenal world, who experiences the 3 states of Atman. This is omniscient, innermost dweller of all, the sources of all creation and destruction. Whole creation originates from this and in which finally dissolve themselves. This is the causal condition of the universe, corresponding to which there is the causal experience of the Jeev called Pragya. The individual causal state is Pragya, the universal causal state is Ishwar. The individual subtle state is Tejas, the cosmic subtle state is Hiranyagarbha. The individual gross state is Vishwa, the cosmic gross state is Vaishvanar or Virat. Ishwar is understood as the total being in which all the cosmic states of consciousness are united. This mantra is the description of Supreme Self or the transcendental state of consciousness. This is the state of pure consciousness, which is neither causal nor subtle nor gross. It is neither outside nor inside. It has no external nor internal consciousness. That ultimate reality is described in the 7th mantra of Mandukya Upanishad. This absolute is known as the Turiya or the 4th state of consciousness, which is non-dual, transcending all relational manifestation, causal, subtle, and gross. Waking state is aware with gross objects. Dream state is asleep with illusory mental awareness. Deep sleep is asleep with no objects of consciousness and without mental awareness. But Turiya is the state where consciousness moved beyond everything other than itself. In the 4th state of Atman, consciousness neither turns towards external objective world nor internal subjective world, nor it is conscious of both. It is imperceptible, cannot experience through senses, indescribable, beyond qualities, incomprehensible. This is the pure consciousness, the real self. This is non-dual without a second. This is the state of bliss. This supreme self has to be realized. The state of Atman is defined by 3 terms: Ekatva or oneness, Atmatva or selfhood, and Taratva or essentiality. It is the essence of creation. It is one and it is the self. It is the self and therefore it can only be one. The self is that which knows by itself, not by a means, but by its own existence. Perception, inference, verbal testimony, comparison are different sources of knowledge do not apply here. At this point, self and existence are one and the same thing. Existence is self, existence is Atman. This ultimate truth can be realized by intuition, which is a non relational apprehension of reality, independent of the activity of the senses and the mind, where existence becomes identical with knowledge, and knowledge is one with the known. Here, the object of knowledge is the same as the knowledge and intuition. This is non-dual state. We cannot even call it as the one. It is not two. That is all. Because to call it one would be to denote it by a numerical figure. It is not one because there is nothing other than it. We can only say it is not true or Advait. This is the fourth state of consciousness, which is called the Atman. It is called the fourth, not numerically, but in comparison with the three relative states of waking, dream, and deep sleep. Mandukya Upanishad concludes with the explanation of harmony between manifested and unmanifested aspects of Omkar. It establishes the unity of Supreme Self and individual self, as there are three relative phases of Atman in empirical world. Upcoming verses of Mandukya Upanishad explains the three relative phases of Om. Akar, Ukar, and Makar are the three constitutive elements of Om. Om is constituted by three syllables, which are A, U, and Ma. Each syllable describes the different stages of.
Now start coming to conclusion.
Okay. Om is constituted by three syllables, which are A, U, and Ma. Each syllable describes the different stages of individual consciousness. That individual consciousness or Atman is supreme consciousness itself. Akar, Ukar, and Makar are identical with three stages of Jeev, as we know, waking, dream, and deep sleep. Turiya is the silence or Shabdati beyond the three stages, beyond the other three stages of consciousness. Skip कर सकती हूँ कुछ point. Last. So fourth and final stage of Omkar is the soundless stage, beyond three syllables of Omkar. It has no parts. There is no part and the sound beyond Omkar. It is after the three syllables of Omkar, therefore known as Amatra or Shabdati. Matra refers to measure, but the Turiya is measureless. This is the state which is not comprehended by senses. It is in this state of all worldly affairs cease. This is the soundless form of Omkar. This form of Om is Supreme Self or Brahman itself. The Jeev who realizes thus merges himself into Supreme Self. This is the state of non-dual reality. One who realizes this subtle state of consciousness become one with Brahman. This state of consciousness is a vibration of being and not a state of sound, and there is no material content in this vibration. It transcends the gross, the subtle, and the causal states, and it is not even merely the vibration which sets creation in motion. It is subtler than even the causal vibration with which creation commenced. The only word the Upanishad uses to name this state is Amatra, the immeasurable. Sound of the creation sees here in this soundless state of Om. It is most auspicious, blessed, and non-dual. Creation and the creator become one here. The merger of Om in the Atman is the merger of creation in the absolute. There is no creatorship also because there is no created. When the Atman become the Atman, through the Atman, it is called Atma Sakshatkar, realization of the self. It is existence, it is consciousness, it is bliss, it is perfection, it is moksha. This is the goal of life, the path to which is beautifully described in the Mandukya Upanishad. With this word, I am thankful to the audience for their patient listening. Thank you. जी जी मैं चैंट कर सकती थी.
Have you concluded? Thank you very much. We are open to questions. हाँ, go ahead.
थैंक यू वेरी मच मैडम. आपने बहुत अच्छा उसका दिया, लेकिन मैं चूंकि फिजिक्स का स्टूडेंट रहा हूँ तो मेरा सब्जेक्ट कुछ अलग से बात करूंगा, आप गुस्से मत होना. जब हम कहते हैं कि ये वर्ल्ड जो है रियल नहीं है, डिल्यूजन है, तो फिर ये जितना भी स्ट्रक्चर है माइंड का वो अपने आप डिमोलिश हो जाता है, क्योंकि इल्यूजन तो कुछ भी नहीं है. It cannot be a substance, it cannot be anything. It is just, demolishing its own structure. तो अब पूरी व्यवस्था तो है, स्ट्रेटेजी है, पूरे ब्रह्मांड है, कॉस्मोस जैसे आपने नाम लिया, और उसमें अनंत प्लेनेट हैं, अनंत गैलेक्सीज हैं. तो मेरा ये कहना है कि अगर ब्रह्मांड में हम ही अगर अपने आप को ये कहें कि जी हम सर्वज्ञाता हैं, तो ना तो हम यूएफओ को पहचान पाते हैं. अब हम कहते हैं कि एक अच्छा भी देयर कैन बी समथिंग बेटर. अब इसमें आप इसको इनफाइनाइट को और अनंत को और कॉस्मोस को जोड़ के कुछ अगर आप दो शब्द कह सकें तो बड़ी आपकी कृपा होगी. बस थैंक यू.
जी सर, आपका क्वेश्चन था कि ये जो वर्ल्ड है इल्यूशन नहीं है, तो ये डिमोलिश हो जाता है.
नहीं, उनका प्रश्न ये है, देखिए, it is a critical question in the sense that when we look at things or schools of philosophy or ideas from within, somebody who is either a believer or a practitioner, they make perfect sense to us and there is no problem about it. On the other hand, when they have to confront with an external perception or external critique, it becomes totally different. So what you are facing right now is an external critique of the entire idea of Brahma or Advait. What the gentleman is trying to say is that it's all very well for people who believe in Advait to say that there is nothing else and only the self or the Atman or the Brahm exists. But if that is the case, how do you understand the phenomenal world, this infinite phenomenal world around you? Can you relate them in any way? Would you like to say anything there? It's okay if you don't want to.
ना एक्चुअली इसका सोल्यूशन है जीवन मुक्त. इसका सोल्यूशन है जीवन मुक्त का जो कॉन्सेप्ट है.
कोई बात. See, let me try to say something in response to what you have said. देखिए, these questions have been raised by philosophers over thousands of years. And at some level, physics is also a form of philosophy. The greatest physicists of the world have also been philosophers in some way. Of course, this is true of Einstein as well. Because what is physics? It deals with existence. All existence around us, but the difference is that it does not deal with the inner existence, but the phenomenal existence. Now, as you rightly said, that when we look at something like this from the internal point of view, it makes complete sense. that I think, therefore I am. And now I can be sure that I am something because I think there is some consciousness involved. No matter what name you give it, whether you call it self, as Buddhist philosophy does, you call it soul, as many people do, or consciousness, as modern psychology calls it, and it claims that it dies at the time of death. It is just an agglomeration of uh, all the all the relations that neurons have in our brains, and so on and so forth. So that is one way of looking at this internal reality. But the fact remains that we can be fairly confident in terms of philosophical discourses, uh, that there is something like the self, whatever the nature of the self might be, and you know, whatever its beginning or end might be. Those things may be questionable. Now, the question of phenomenal world, which has been discussed by Kant at length, and the difference between the noumenal and the phenomenal. I think your question is related to that. And even the greatest Western philosopher could not finally resolve a question like this. Ji.
और कॉस्मिक कॉन्शियसनेस और इनफाइनाइट कॉन्शियसनेस को अगर आप एक सूत्र में बांध सकते हो तो वो भी
नहीं, who can do it? I'm not claiming to do it, please. But I'm just trying to continue the discussion with you.
कुछ भी बोल रहे हैं आप.
I'm just trying to continue the discussion.
अगर ये जो स्ट्रक्चर है, मैं मान लिया इसको कि ये वर्ल्ड के पूरे उस पे एक गॉड है, तो यूनिवर्स में कौन सा गॉड है, फिर कॉस्मोस का गॉड कौन सा है, तो फिर ये अनंत का गॉड कौन सा है. आई एम जस्ट
but she's not talking about God, you see. She is not talking about God. In fact, Brahma, Advaita is a denial of God.
That
Advaita is a denial of God. So she's not talking, we are not talking about God here. Let's stay away from that. We are only talking about the philosophical question of existence.
नहीं, जब आप कहते हैं अनंत के साथ जुड़ना है,
if you just allow me to,
ट्रांसेंड जो है वो यही है.
I'm not saying that, by the way. First of all, you must remember that in my introduction itself, I said that people developed a special fascination for, I think you were there, for Advaita from the 19th century. I personally have no such fascination. So I understand the point you are trying to make. So in order to carry on this discussion, what I want to say is this. As far as the noumenal world is concerned, we can know only the self. What things are in themselves, we can never discover. Now, the point is, it is all very right to say that the universe is infinite. Of course, it is infinite. There are trillions of galaxies, and there are trillions of stars in each galaxy. And the chances are, as you rightly said, that there will be life in other parts of the universe also. All that is correct. But there are 2-3 important questions which physics has not been able to resolve. Just as metaphysics and philosophy have failed, physics too has failed. Now, one question is that of what is time. Now, you see, people think that Einstein provided the final answer to what is time, but I don't think Einstein ever claimed that. It is his followers who claim this. I would say, and this is something that that the great Indian grammarian and poet Bhartrihari said in his Vairagya Shatakam, "Kalo na yato vayameva yata." This notion that somehow it is time that passes, probably that itself is questionable. It is not time that passes, it is we who pass. And probably, you see, this distinction between the past, present, and the future, you said that you used the word illusion. Probably that is a cognitive limitation of human mind, we cannot perceive time, as yeah, pardon. Yes, so naturally, because of the cognitive limitation of the human mind, probably it's not possible for us to perceive the subtleties of time. So this is one thing. And second uncertainty in physics, where it relates to again philosophy, these two connections, is that of quantum mechanics. Now in quantum, we know that there is a lot of uncertainty about existence. And so it's an old thing, and Einstein tried in the later part of his life to integrate quantum with his theory, the theory, general theory of relativity. But even the greatest scientist of the modern world failed to do that, because if you believe in one, the other does not make sense, and if you believe in the other, this does not make sense. So I agree with your point that it's not advisable to uncritically sort of uh, start believing that the universe is nothing or it's an illusion, etc., etc. Yeah, yeah. Even she did not say that. Even she did not say that. I'm just supplementing to what happened. But on the other hand, it is also not good for physics or people who believe in physics, rather, as you said, you are a student of physics, to think that the final answers have been provided or can even be provided. We really don't know about these things. So the best form of discourse is to, of course, distance yourself from all these things and try to look at them dispassionately, in a way, isn't it? No, I'm myself, fascinated by physics. I understand your point very well, that when you look at the phenomenal world, much of the philosophy of this kind, especially Advait, seems to be very different from what it seems when you are a believer. You think that, it is only Advait and nothing else. And as I earlier said in my introduction itself, that there is too much fascination with Advait, and there are historical and political roots of that fascination. I'm not passing any comment on whether Advait is good or bad or not, that sort, but the historical origins of that fascination, they lie, in my opinion, in the 19th century, when India was a conquered society. So our educated classes, our intellectuals, people like Vivekananda and others, they wanted to prove that, somehow we have a higher form of philosophy, which is above all this, above the gross things that exist in our religion. Now, which is not based on untruth. There is truth in this, but the point is that it has been given uh, too much weightage, perhaps. But why should there be a problem with dualism? See, this is my point. Uh, Neither dualism is as much a school of Indian philosophy as non-dualism. But unfortunately, nobody talks about dualism now. Everybody talks about only Advait. Nobody talks about Dvait. Why so? Naturally, there is a reason behind it, because Dvait seems to be unfashionable. Advait seems to be fashionable.
But if Advait explains the
Let others also
yeah,
speak.
yeah, yeah.
No,
One last comment.
You can come back
I
later.
don't have
Okay,
any
okay, okay.
question. Just I would like to add, uh, if you allow, sir, neti neti and idam asti.
We can't hear you. Can you speak louder?
Neti neti and idam asti. These are two concepts, and if you think it is important to add, only then I think some answers would come at this stage. Na idam asti and neti neti, both.
मुझे लगता है सागर जी, आपने और आपने सब मिलाया बात को। तो जो द्वैत है और अद्वैत के लिए, इन दोनों को मिलाते हुए एक बहुत शानदार श्लोक है, और मुझे लगता है कि वो आपका उत्तर भी हो। हाँ, ओम पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। तो अब
चलिए, बहुत
पूर्ण
बढ़िया।
में ही, पूर्ण में ही से ही निकल रहा है और पूर्ण में ही मिल जा रहा है। तो एक तो इसका ये चीज कर सकते हैं जो बताया सर ने कि अच्छी बात कही कि नेति नेति। दूसरा जो बताया उसकी जगह मैं कहूंगा चरई वेति, है ना, चले चलो चले चलो। जो आपसे प्रश्न है वो ये है कि अभी चूंकि मैं लास्ट में आया था, सॉरी। एक है जागृत अवस्था, एक है सुप्तावस्था, एक है स्वप्नावस्था। स्वप्न का भी अपना जीवन है और ढेर सारे फिलोसफर ये मानते हैं कि स्वप्न का जीवन झूठा नहीं है। स्वप्न का जीवन भी भले ही वो छोटा है लेकिन वो सच्चा जीवन है, उसमें आप जी रहे होते हैं। और एक है तूर्य अवस्था जिसे आपने कहा। इन सब के अलावा एक है आत्म साक्षात्कार। तो अब ये जो तूर्य अवस्था है, आपने लास्ट में बताने की कोशिश की कि इन, एक तो प्रश्न ये है कि इन तीनों से तूर्य अवस्था कैसे अलग है, ठीक है। दूसरा, तूर्य अवस्था क्या आत्म साक्षात्कार में जाने का सबसे बेहतर माध्यम है? ये दो चीज अगर आप कुछ एक्सप्लेन कर सके तो।
हाँ वरदा, आप भी पूछ लीजिए फिर।
जी। Thank you, Dr. Khatun, for this presentation. Many people interpret Advaita as monotheism. So, do you subscribe to this understanding of Advaita?
I don't think anybody does.
Yes,
Anybody
yes.
who knows the meaning of Advaita will never translate it as
So,
monotheism.
of course, there are some.
It is monism, not monotheism.
Monism as well as monotheistic. So, these are some interpretations.
I don't
which
think
I
anybody
came across.
who knows about
And
Advaita.
in response to Dr. Mishra's comment, so I somehow disagree with your interpretation that it was only in the 19th century, because I study Bhakti and particularly in Maharashtra, somebody called Gyaneshwar, and in the
I
commentary
know,
on the
you know.
Bhagavad Gita. So to say that, and
You
historically
didn't get my
speaking,
point right. You see, what I said was,
and, moment, let me complete my point. And also the fascination for dualism, because it is out of fashion. I see ISKCON growing everywhere across the globe. Bhakti, there is, because I study
yes,
Bhakti, there
but
is
as,
growing
as an
interest more
intellectual
and more
discourse,
in
ISKCON
Bhakti.
is not growing. That's
And
the
more
difference.
importantly, when people, so Gyaneshwar today in Maharashtra is often quoted. So his entire philosophy is based on Advaita, and he says in his introduction to Gyaneshwari that I am basing my interpretations of Bhagavad Gita on the philosophy of Shankaracharya. So which is Advaita, and then in 19th century Advaita Vedanta. Interestingly, in today's Maharashtra, he is one of the foremost leading figures of Bhakti. So my interest lies there, how this collaboration of Advaita and Bhakti, the non-dual and the dual, and I think Sir quoted this Purnamada Purnamidam. So I think somewhere there it would lie. So I don't think it's either or. It's either Advaita or Bhakti or dualism. It may be something in between the gray area.
Let me clarify
Thank
what
you.
I meant when I said that this fascination started in the 19th century. I never said, if you heard me carefully, that Advaita is a creation of the 19th century. Obviously, I could not have said that. I said this fascination started in the 19th century, and there is ample evidence for this, because India as a conquered society came under intellectual attack from outsiders, and the popular form of religion in this country was denounced by Christian missionaries and others. As a result of this, our intellectuals and other leaders, they started this quest for upholding that form of religion which seemed to be the most rational or the most palatable, the least objectionable, the least controversial. Now, why is it not just this, not just non-dualism? They also started promoting monotheism. Why did they start producing monotheism? In reaction to the critique that Hinduism was polytheistic. Now,
So I feel
let
this
me
is one
complete.
of the waves of going back to Advaita.
Now,
there were multiple ways.
why
to
did
look at
this?
Advaita
Why
even
did
before.
this? Why did this? Why did this? Why did this fascination even with monotheism start? Monotheism was always there in India. Monotheism was there, monism was there, dualism, non-dualism, different forms of religion, philosophical belief, all of them had been there. Virtually everything that you could imagine. In fact, as Western philosophers have said, all possible forms of speculation about existence, they were done in this country thousands of years ago. All of them had existed. And as you talked about Gyaneshwar, yes, all that was there. But I'm looking at it as a student of history. Why is it that from 19th century till now, there is this fascination with proving? I find people saying that Indian civilization is basically Vedantic. It is not. Indian civilization is not essentially anything. Indian civilization is everything. Indian civilization has Vedant. It has dualism also. It has popular religion. It has sagun, nirgun, everything. Why should we say that we have only this? I'm trying to decode that, and as I told you, the reason is precisely this.
Was when you say it started in 19, that's
No,
where
fascination is
so
started.
maybe
Fascination is started. Fascination is started in 19th century. And by the way, since you talk about Maharashtra, in the middle of the 19th century, there was a long debate between Baba Vishnu Brahmachari and the Christian missionaries. Philosophical debate about the merits of Hinduism versus Christianity at Chowpatty, by the way. Fascinating debates. So we must understand that atmosphere in which the indigenous society was being questioned in all kinds of ways, because our society was so different from the European society, from the Western society. So in that environment, many of our leading intellectuals thought that this is the best form of religion or philosophy, because this can be most acceptable to everybody. This does not mean that I'm saying that this Advaita is wrong, or Vedant is wrong, or anything of that sort. That's not my purpose. But we must understand the historical origins and waves and changes and departures in the popularity of ideas. An idea may have existed for hundreds of thousands of years, but why does it become more popular at a certain juncture in history? There are social and political forces uh, behind it often. That is what we must understand. Yes, please.
Yeah, just a little thing that occurred to me about the historicity of things. Sri Ramakrishna is somebody who came at a time when the British were quite entrenched in India, and it's always quite fascinated me that if you read what he says, it's pure Advait, but if you read about his life, it's pure Bhakti. So that is, in a way, a kind of a combination of how both can exist, or both are so compatible with each other, because he manifested.
But you have hit the nail on the head. But the difference is that he was not an intellectual, unlike his disciple Vivekananda.
Yeah, but
he was
what he spoke was pure.
No,
really
he
pure
had
Advaita.
realized God and he had realized the self, but he never tried to create a doctrine, you see. That's the main difference. I'm saying it is intellectuals. Vivekananda was more of an intellectual compared to his Guru Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna was a bhakta. He believed in it and he realized it. So my point is that it is intellectuals, who sort of from the 19th century, they went after this.
I mean, if you read what he spoke, the records that I have read of what
the
he did.
records of the masters.
Yeah,
No, they were written later, obviously. He has not written it.
No, he has not written it, but he's recounted his conversations. In his conversations, he speaks pretty pure Advaita.
I have read it in English, of course. So
I've also read it only in English.
Has been done.
I've read it in English, but that had struck me that, his example that he set was one, his words were Gyan and Bhakti.
You see, the sants, starting from, you take any sant, Gyaneshwar, Tukaram, Kabir, all of them, they followed a different path altogether, not the intellectual path. This does not mean they lacked in intellect.
Again, I have something in response to what you're saying. Are we essentially putting these dual categories as intelligentsia and
No, no, I'm not.
Bhakt?
As I said,
Because
as
I
I
don't
said,
think I see the moment you say Ramakrishna was more of a bhakt and Vivekananda was more of intelligent person or intelligentsia.
no, I didn't say intelligent. Please
Yeah.
don't put
So
words.
intelligentsia who belonged to an intelligentsia and who created a doctrine. Are we then implying that Vivekananda was less of a bhakt? Is that an
Certainly,
implication?
certainly.
So
He was not
then
as,
think there
I
is
don't
something
think
that we
that
need to
anybody who
revisit.
knows both Ramakrishna and Vivekananda will say that Vivekananda was as much of a bhakt as Ramakrishna. I think anybody who knows about them will say that Ramakrishna was a param bhakt and he was in a different category, and his disciple Vivekananda was also a bhakt, but he was more of an intellectual, modern intellectual. I think anybody can see through this distinction. I disagree with you entirely.
Same here. I disagree with you here.
एक लाइन सर डिसएग्री होना ही चाहिए क्योंकि अनेकांतवाद को सर अगर इंक्लूड कर लें तो मेरे ख्याल से काफी चीजें फिर क्लियर हो जाएंगी. सप्तभंगी जिसे कहते हैं, and Saptabhangina is significant in this discussion. I am not going to involve. मांडूक्य उपनिषद का एक छोटी सी बात जो आपने कही, in which manner you said Surya is causal.
Sorry, sir.
Surya, sun, is causal. In your presentation, actually, you cited. That's why I am asking, in which manner? Before Hiranyakar
is causal or cause.
You said sun is causal.
No, no, she didn't say
Sir,
that.
मैंने sun नहीं कहा.
There is some misunderstanding. She didn't say that.
Okay, I will try to listen again.
No, no, she didn't say that. She didn't say that.
सर आपने कहा कि जागृत, स्वप्न और सुषुप्ति तीनों में कॉमन क्या है? आपका सवाल था जो
मैंने ये पूछा था कि जागृत अवस्था, सुप्तावस्था, स्वप्नावस्था,
जी जी
इससे तुरीयावस्था कैसे अलग है?
जी जी.
ठीक है. और तुरीयावस्था क्या आत्म साक्षात्कार तक पहुंचने का सबसे ठीक माध्यम है या सबसे बढ़िया माध्यम है?
तुरीय अवस्था माध्यम नहीं है. तुरीय अवस्था एक्चुअली प्योर कॉन्शियसनेस है. वहाँ डुअलिटी नहीं होती है. वहाँ ज्ञाता, ज्ञेय और ज्ञान, नॉलेज, नोन एंड नोअर, वो तीनों का जो वो तीनों मर्ज हो जाते हैं. वो ही एक्चुअली वो पॉइंट है, इनडिस्क्राइबेबल है. वही आत्म साक्षात्कार है. वहाँ को वो नॉन डुअल स्टेट है. वहाँ कुछ भी, उसी को तो नेति के द्वारा डिस्क्राइब किया जाता है. और जागृत, स्वप्न और सुषुप्ति तुरीयावस्था से अलग है क्योंकि इनमें भी वही कॉन्शियसनेस है, लेकिन उनमें इग्नोरेंस होता है. जब ये इग्नोरेंस हटता है वो तुरीयावस्था है. उसे ही प्राप्ति कहा गया है. जी
हाँ, ठीक. Any other question? हाँ, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nirbu and I work here. I work here as an archival assistant. So first of all, thank you for an insightful view on and your work. I'm very fascinated with the term Om, so I would like to get some answers from you on this topic. So the term like Om the term has the way you encompass so many things in the term Om and how it is described, what it is. But I find that it is very difficult to get the real idea of it because the term has come to mean so many things that it loses it ceases to perform the function of a verbal sign. Like it loses its meaning by itself because it encompasses so many things. So I just want to know what is your opinion on it, first of all, or if I want to make a question out of it, like how will anyone explain in a layman's term the term Om to anyone? Yeah, that's it.
देखिए, ओम 3 अक्षरों से बना है, अ उ म, और ये
as like that's what it ये बहुत सारी चीजों को इन्वॉल्व कर लेता है ना द टर्म ओम. तो इसके वजह से जो इसका एक टर्म का एक खुद का मीनिंग, एक वैल्यू ऑफ अ मीनिंग खत्म हो जाता है, उसकी जो एक वर्ड का मीनिंग ही खत्म हो जाता है. तो अगर मेरे को एक ओपिनियन चाहिए था कि व्हाट इसका अबाउट दिस थिंग, अगर एक इसको क्वेश्चन में बदल दिया जाए तो लाइक एक लेमन टर्म, लाइक किसी एक नॉर्मल से इंसान को मुझे समझाना हो या किसी को आपको समझाना हो तो आप कैसे समझाएंगे इन अ वेरी लेमन्स टर्म?
Okay.
What philosophers of this country have been explaining for thousands of years and have not been able to. So obviously now you have asked a question which will remain without an answer. Of course, we'll carry on. ये जो what you have said is that the question of all questions. So every term loses its value with the when we encompasses so many things in it. Like for example, my work was on identity. The same thing happened with the term identity. Like it encompasses so many things, it loses its value with the time. It meant something else with every passage of time. So that's basically in the terms of I
historicity.
understand. Now let me tell you, it is the job of scholars to discover the different layers of meanings. So historians discover the layers which got attached to a word during certain periods. So there may be a word which has existed for thousands of years, but historians may be able to tell you that in this age the word had this meaning, in this age the word had this meaning, and today the word of course has this meaning. Similarly, sociologists will be able to tell you that in this society, in this social context, the word has this meaning, in another it has this meaning. And the same can be done by other social scientists, anthropologists especially. Riddhi is here. So that analysis of course is very important, and it is done regularly by social scientists certainly. And in fact that is what introduces rigor in human thinking, because as we said, a word may have existed for thousands of years, but what we must understand is what it meant in a specific context. Knowing the general meaning of a word does not give you much idea about its depth or about its nuances. In fact, this is precisely I tangentially touched upon it when I said that this Advait has become a fascinating thing, because people have, as I said, from the 19th century, they thought that somehow this is something which is the highest form of spirituality or religion, so they adopted it mostly without understanding what it meant, or without any critical analysis of it, precisely for this reason. Because you take a word, it may have meant something, one thing at the time of Mandukya Upanishad being written. It may have meant another thing when Shankaracharya was writing his Vivek Chudamani or Atmabodh. You did not refer to any of them, in fact. So I was probably thinking you would. It might have meant something else in 19th century, and today in the fashionable circles it may have become something else altogether. So according to their specific needs, people seek to define and redefine things. And that is why, as you rightly said, you see, one word acquires so many meanings. And it might fortunately that has not happened to Advait. I'm not claiming that, but certainly even Advait has acquired many meanings. And as Varda said, maybe some people are confused even between monotheism and monism. It's possible, though I would regard it as strange, but it is quite possible, because the fact is that the distinction is quite clear, of course, because monotheism means that you believe in one creator, but the creator is different from creation. That's in two lines. That is what monotheism means. And monism means that you don't believe that creator and creation are different, they are one and the same. There may be, of course, finer points and distinctions there. So, by the way, as far as this dualism in a general sense is concerned, it is questioned by other religions also, but it is questioned in the sense of monotheism. It is questioned in the Islamic concept of Dui, for example. It says that there is only one God. So Dui is a violation of the principle that there is only one God, but it is not obviously our non-dualism. So you will see that Allama Iqbal, for example, says बातिल दुई पसंद है हक ला शरीक है शिरकत मया नए हको बातिल न कर कबूल, meaning that batil means false faith. So false faith is dualistic. That's what he says. It loves dualism. Batil dui pasand hai, haq la sharik hai. Whereas the real religion, la sharik, means it does not recognize anyone other than Allah. Any creator other than Allah. Haq la sharik hai. Shirkat maya naye hako batil na kar kubul. Let us therefore not accept false faith. So, in that sense, of course, this Dui or the idea of dualism has been taken in different ways. But in our tradition, the meaning is very, very clear, and all these philosophical schools have existed in this country for thousands of years. Any final question? Otherwise, we wind up. Kamalji?
To know the view of what Mr. Khatun thinks about it. Like when we listen to Sankara.
Can't you take off your mask? We can't hear.
When we hear Sankarachar, so there is a clear thing that, okay, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya Jivo Brahma Para. That's a clear line. But while listening to your presentation, I was fascinated by this idea of 19 categories where you discussed how the creation is the whole
19 categories वो means है जो individual self उसके through external world को experience करता है. अंतःकरण और जो पंच ज्ञानेंद्रिय कर्मेंद्रिय और जो पंच प्राण होते हैं, तो वो means है.
Yeah, so what I mean to ask is, how do you see like this? Here we have a text, Mandukya Upanishad, which of course was read by and is considered as one of the key texts as far as Advaita Vedanta is concerned. But in this very text, we have, the things are not so settled as I could see through your presentation. Maybe it's a misreading. That there's a big discussion about the categories and about the whole creation, how it, so how do you see like about these categories and things which are discussed?
What he's trying to ask you is, in simple words, if I can put it plainly, maybe he's trying to be extra polite. What I mean to say is, he's asking for your critical assessment of these categories. That's it. I think he's nodding. So,
which kind of categories?
No, all these categories, all these things that you have discussed. What is your reflection on these?
Actually, मांडुक्य उपनिषद के जो start होता है वो human consciousness को define करता है, जो चार अवस्थाओं के माध्यम से या waking, dream and deep sleep उसके माध्यम से ये बताता है कि जो common है वो consciousness है, लेकिन ignorance की वजह से ये diversity, differences ये दिखते हैं. और जो last के 4 मंत्र हैं वो बताते हैं कि कैसे आप इग्नोरेंस से दूर हटके ऊपर जाते हैं, अपने मूल स्वरूप में जाते हैं.
Anyone else?
सर मैं स्वामी जी को रिक्वेस्ट करना चाहती हूँ. नमस्ते स्वामी जी, I request you to give your reflection on this problem of phenomena.
Narayana, I'm very happy to have been here. I've been there, and your presentation was very clear. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Jahira, can you hear me?
Ji Swami ji.
So your presentation was very clear, and for a person who has studied this for many years, I found it also a lot of new ideas in it, and a lot of ideas, and it was very well expressed. So this is not an easy Upanishad; it's a difficult Upanishad, and which we learn. After a good deal of many years of sadhana, we learn this Upanishad. We don't learn in the beginning. And I'm very happy that you have been able to give such a good explanation of it. There's one thing which I'd like to say about the discussion about Swami Vivekananda Sri Ramsha Paramahamsa. That is about his bhakti. Swami Vivekananda once made what other disciples thought was a very irreverent comment about Sri Ramakrishna. So he said, no, I have to say it because my heart is bursting with devotion for him. So I have to tie it up with jnana. So we see also in a case of Adi Shankara, he's a great bhakta, but he covers himself with jnana. And I saw in the case of my guru, who was a great jnani, but taught us bhakti and was also the soul of devotion to her guru and to her Ishtadeva. So both complement each other. One does not stand on the other. And about the advantage which a disciple which Swami Vivekananda would have had was that when a disciple stands on the shoulders of his guru, so he has, if I have the experiences of my guru to fall back upon, I have the teachings, the quest of my guru to fall back upon. So I am that much, I have that advantage. I can not only have to learn the Shastras, but I have the teachings of my guru, the experience of my guru, which explain the Shastras to me, which my guru did not have that experience. They had the experience of their guru only. So each Shishya is more fortunate and gets more and stands upon the experience of their guru. So that's why they keep on saying about Shankara Bhava, saying, Shankara Deshikame Sharanam, you are my refuge. Because it is from that guru's teachings on which we stand and we are able to proceed. Thank you, Narayan.
Thank you. I think that's it. We have reached the end of this session.
I hope, Ravi, you don't mind what I said.
No, not at all. In fact,
you're a very clear speaker and I admire the way you presented everything which you had to say. But this matter, I mean, you all don't have the direct experience, so that's why I said it.
No. It's very good. We welcome this very free and open discussion. In fact, it rarely happens. But because so many people are interested in this larger subject of Advait, so we have had so much discussion because everybody wants to talk about it. And we are very thankful for your gracious presence on this occasion. Thank you so much. Okay, so I take this responsibility to thank all members of the audience and of course Dr. Jahira Khatun for her lecture. Let's have tea outside. I don't know. She would know.
ये चेन्नई से है, Shri Vishnu Mohan Foundation.